Welcome to another edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott Beck. And Scott, we are going to start with a mailbag question. This is a mailbag from me to me, and that is, how do we get more people to understand the landscape of women's college wrestling? This comes on the heels of a question that was posed or a statement that was posed on an Instagram post. I don't typically like to read into comments or what people are saying, but this one really struck me. It was on a comment that was on Instagram about Esther Kolawali, who's an Olympian, and it said, I don't think girls wrestling has D1, D2, or D3 yet. I think it's only NAIA right now. Someone responded, this was the first year that NCAA made women's wrestling a championship sport. Not true. That's going to be next season. So
Yep.
they spelled it wrong and they said MAIA women's wrestling is still the best of the best for the most part. The only thing I can think of, Scott, to answer a question like this is repetition. Keep talking about it. We had all those posts from last week, all the dialogue about Iowa winning the championship, North Central. One said there's only really two teams, and they said Iowa and McKendree left out North Central. Fortunately, some people got in the comments and talked about some of the other programs. But Scott, at this point, it's just got to be repetition until people get this straight.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So I'm glad I don't do or have social media, so I don't have to get annoyed at that idle banter going back and forth. But I do think it's repetition, and I think we'll finally have a cleaner landscape moving forward. So after this year, we're not going to have to explain this transition anymore. We'll have, NCAA, which will have multiple divisions, hopefully for some time, and NAIA, and then this will segue into you talking about the club division as well. I forget which initials that is, but yeah, I think it's just going to take time, and it'll get cleaner as we go on. And it's a little unique with the women's wrestling as opposed to the men that the NAIA is just much closer in talent to the will be to the NCAA for at least foreseeable future.
When I first saw this, my thought was to be reactionary and be upset. But as I think about it, there's things that it takes me 1, 2, 3 years to finally grasp and understand, whether it's junior nationals or how the world team trials process works. So you have to be patient, and that's why I think the answer is repetition. Just get the correct information out there over and over and over again so that people see it, and you can't assume anything. And that's why when we do talk about things, it may be repetitive. We've got to keep talking about maybe it's some of the same issues over and over again. Maybe it's some of the same topics over and over again, but you've got to drill it home. And I know that's been important for me to understand something, whether it's the new kickoff rule in the NFL and maybe understanding that. So it's just got to be over and over and over again.
Yeah, so bear with our repetition, I guess, is the conclusion.
NAIA Championships concluded. Life University won its first championship ever by 70 points. And I have to think that Ashley Flavin and Christian Flavin, the head coach and associate head coaches, are relieved. They have placed second 3 of the last 4 seasons. They also placed second one season in the WCWA. And Scott winning a championship, getting over the hump, finally getting it done, that is an unbelievable feeling for a lot of these coaches. I go back to Jay Robinson when they finally won at Minnesota in 2001. He had a formula and a plan that he was going to get it done in 5 years. It took him 15 years. And I can remember vividly people would criticize and really get after Minnesota and say, here's why it wasn't as valid. And I always remember Jay Robinson's comment. He said, Kyle, he goes, and he pointed his, showed his ring finger. He goes, have them come talk to me when they have one of these.
Yeah,
Meaning,
it's win a national title in pretty much any sport, any division is not trivial, and it's definitely be to be complimented. Good job by Ashley Flavin and Life University, and I think it's rewarding when you finally win, and I think this was widely expected, but just because you have the team and you expect it, and what that team had was tremendous depth, from pretty much from top to bottom. They had their own kind of murderers row with the McBride sisters, but but you actually have to go on the mat and do it. And things happen. So, kudos to them that they accomplished that. Congratulations. And it was a very interesting tournament in that, you had kind of some upsets, but there was some of the basic themes of what we thought would happen kind of did happen. The Nigerians put in a great performance with multiple champions. Ogunsanya at 117, Odukoye at 131, Kalawale at 145, and Odukorwe, I'm going to mispronounce it again. I'm sorry if I do. Mota Pettis was losing in the semis on the bottom side of 131 and hit a great arm drag to an inside trip to a fall. But, we knew you had two very good Nigerians in that weight class and, a three-time defending NAIA national champion, Carolina Moreno, who got taken out and wound up taking fourth. We had the Stefano Jelacic battle with Anaya Falcon, which Jelacic won this time. I think it was Falcon might have won on criteria, a very close match the first time. The match that we went back and forth on multiple times at 124, Cristel Rodriguez against Katie Gomez, we ultimately came to the conclusion that it was kind of a toss-up. And, Rodriguez won 5-5 on criteria, so I guess it was kind of a toss-up. And then you had two of the three McBride sisters, Dana and Latifa, won, and Jamila lost to Esther Kolawale, who, as we've talked about, is an Olympian and a U23 world bronze medalist. So, overall, Ashley Lake has got her second title. So I think it was kind of a quote chalk tournament, but with some very good bouts, and it kind of went mostly to form, I think.
Life University, 170 points, or excuse me, 190 and a half points, 70 points better than second place. 10 All-Americans, sent 12 wrestlers, all 12 scored. And a great formula to win a championship is send wrestlers to the finals. They went 6 for 6 in the semis, sent 6 to the finals, 3 champions. So you had half of your semifinalists win titles, and then you run against some buzzsaws there in the finals with the other one. Savannah Isaac winning at 207 pounds. So she didn't close it out because they started at 131 and then ended at 124, which I thought was a great idea. So
that was good.
I appreciate what the NAI did on doing that. But that's a formula for success is send your wrestlers to the championship finals to get over the hump and blast them out of the water. You could see the momentum going in Life's way the entire tournament. As a coach, you're not feeling good until it's mathematically impossible for another team to win. But throughout the season, throughout the tournament, you just felt like Life was gonna maybe not run away with it, but they ended up running away with it.
Yeah, it was their year, and they had tremendous depth and great athletes. So it wasn't really a surprise, but it was a good, I think the wrestling in the tournament, it was a good tournament, especially, I think, maybe, a little top heavy, meaning the top, other than like 131, where the top, 6, 7 were really, really good. I think there's a number of weights where maybe the top 2 or 3 were really, really solid, and there was a drop off as you went, towards like All Americans 5 through 8. You didn't have the same depth, I think, as the NCAA, in general. But I think at the top, like the finals matchups were very compelling and very good matches.
Grandview University places second. Here's what surprised me. If you would have asked, I would have figured that the top 5 would have been the schools we talked about in the preview. Life University, Grandview, William Penn, Providence, and Southern Oregon. It ended up not being that way. Cumberland's had an outstanding tournament, getting third place. They wrestled well in the consolation rounds. They got third. William Penn got fourth place. Providence in sixth place. Missouri Valley had a good tournament in fifth, so they kind of made a late season charge and added some wrestlers to their lineup. And then Southern Oregon in seventh. So if you're asking about surprises, I would say Cumberland's. They did a nice job getting third place, getting a trophy. And then Missouri Valley coming up and getting fifth place. So nice job to both those programs.
Yeah, it's good to see teams come on strong toward the end of the year. And, national, tournaments in general are very hard. It's maybe easy to pick the dominant teams that are going to place up there, but you could look at a team on paper and say how they did during the year, but it's very matchup oriented. You could have somebody that's in a relatively weak place, weak weight class, or you can have somebody that gets upset. So somebody can march to the finals, maybe where you wouldn't think they'd be seeded to do that. And then, how people recover and perform on the backside really matters. And that is a lot of coaching. There's nothing harder than having your dream shattered and then have to go on the mat again. And in many cases, like in this tournament, if you lost in the semis, you were getting right back out there. They went right through third, one after another. So if you're upset, it's incumbent upon the athlete to get the next best thing, and really the coaching matters to pull the athletes together and help them to re-believe in themselves and put out the best effort they can and get the best next thing that they can get.
I do just want to bring up on the idea of just getting it done, winning a championship, whether it's individual or the team championship, that when you get into that space, that's such rarefied air. And you don't think less of that person. If you like a person, you like that person, but getting it done does change the way that you view the person for the rest of their lives. And I think about this with Kyvan Gadsden. I live in Cedar Falls. Kyvan Gadsden's from Waterloo. So grew up around him. He came to the kids club where I was working all the time. He gets it done in 2015. And I can remember thinking it's a big difference saying Kyvan plays sixth, fourth, and second versus he got it done and he won it because we threw a
Yeah.
big celebration. He had that whole thing about I just want some ice cream. We had the entire community invited. We probably don't do that if he gets sixth, fourth, and second. So I know for me, when Kyvan Gadsden walks through the door, first thing I think about is that guy got it done. And so
Well,
just that idea of just getting it done, that is a big accomplishment.
yeah, and in his case, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was versus Kyle Snyder. And now he's like an addendum, like, who did Kyle Snyder lose to in college? So it's always going to be Kyvan Gadsden. And Kyle Snyder has won, Olympic gold medal, multiple world titles, and placed in the Olympics and worlds 8 times. Not, I don't even remember what the number is, but it's a lot. And the guy that pinned him, with a lateral drop in the college national finals is Kyvan Gadsden. And, not only do you sometimes remember the name and the place, in many cases, there's like a moment that if you watch that match and it was a close match or a big point move at the end of the match, you literally can see it in your head, and that guy gets or woman becomes associated with that moment.
And getting it done is rarefied for specific tournaments. It's for your national tournament, NAIA or the NCAA or NCWWC. It's making a world team, and then even higher level, it's getting a medal at the Worlds. Then it's winning a gold medal, and then it's winning the Olympics, and then it's multiple world. So there's different levels, but it's not reserved for other tournaments that try to say they're a national championship. To win the NAIA championships or the NCAA championships, that's a big deal because you have college pride, you have your school associated with it, and you get to be part of the conversation. So Ashley Flavin, Clarissa Chun, Joe Norton, Jason Mormon, they have street cred because they've won a championship. And I remember Jim Gibbons, who won a championship for Iowa State, coached them in 1987. He said, when you are the head coach of a college wrestling program, you are the star because your name goes next to that championship and the title. So to get to that level, get over the hump, to work so hard to get it, especially after getting second 3 of the last 4 years, you can't really overstate how big of a win that is for Life University.
Yeah, and then I'll take the other side of it a little bit. As major as it is, then the second it's over, it's what are we doing next year? Like you think you'd have this warm, gooey feeling. I mean, you have this next to your name, and everybody regards you a certain way for doing it. But in your own mind, in many cases, and I've talked to Olympic gold medalists and world champions, and you think they say, "Oh, I'm now at peace. I'm content. I can live the rest of my life." And the irony is, it's the type of person that can win that, whether it's a coach winning a team tournament, then they want to win the next year, get a streak going, or the athlete that wins that big tournament. The contentment might last a night. And then I remember there was a story. I forget if it was like, I don't know if it was my Volgar Arusha might have said this, or one of my coaches might have said where a Russian, I forget the name of the athlete, wins a world title or an Olympic gold medal, and the next morning they see him out running, and then they go, what are you doing? You just won yesterday. He goes, but what about next year? So it's immediately you're already on to the next thing, and the contentment is, unfortunately, it's not as long lasting as you think, because the type of people that can do this always want to keep doing it.
To your point, Jim Miller, who coached Warburg to 10 men's championships, that was the thing he always said, is you go up to the race stage, get the trophy, and you enjoy it for the time you walk there. And his thought was, man, I got to get another one of these next year. So
Yeah.
and he even said that in his book, it's a sick occupation in some ways because you're having 18 to 22, 23-year-olds determining how you feel and your success. And it's a difficult thing to do. And so because they're the competitive mindset, they're just not thinking we just got one, the world is at peace and everything's in order. They're thinking about how do we build a streak and get the next one.
Yeah,
It's a sick mindset, but it's how champions win.
it is. And I would also add, part of being a great coach, it's not just your understanding of the sport. You're also kind of a therapist. You have all these different personalities, and a good coach can see when they're recruiting people that maybe this person doesn't fit into their culture and wouldn't be good and couldn't intermesh, but you're still navigating a lot of different personalities who each are individual people. They're having their ups and downs, versus physically or emotionally, academically, could be family stuff, and you're like have to keep them motivated, keep them together as a unit, nurture them individually, and get the best out of them. It's an exceptionally difficult job and a thankless job. And I would say probably being a wrestling coach is one of the most underpaid jobs on the planet.
Underpaid in the hours and the stress, and just one thing could go awry and you could have everything going smooth and one thing can take all your time. So there's just multiple layers to it. I think a lot of people get into coaching thinking it's going to be being in the room and technique and working with athletes, which it is, but it's compliance, it's recruiting, it's parents. I mean, the list goes on and on. And I think it's probably 5% in the room what coaching actually is. It's problem solving, it's psychology, it's all those things you talked about.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of athletes would say that their wrestling coaches, perhaps other than their parents, and in many cases even more than their parents, had the most influence in their life. I remember my wrestling coach in junior high school, a guy named George Munich, just literally changed my life. I mean, I had a great relationship with my parents, but he just taught me how to compete, how to train, how to, mentality. So, and just to how to be a man, and I think coaches have a tremendous influence. And I think almost every wrestler would say that.
Even though you want more, here's reinforcement of you've got to do it now when you get the opportunity mentality. Caroline Moreno comes in as a three-time national champion, had a quality career. You have to reflect on it and say winning three national championships is an incredible feat. Comes in as the top seed and gets fourth place in a loaded 131-pound bracket as the one we circled as the toughest at the NAIA Championships. You don't know who's going to come in. You don't know what freshmen are going to come in. You don't know what international wrestler is going to come in. You don't know if Xochimota Pettis is going to decide to go to college, who's the U.S. Open champion, and a final Xer come in. It's insanely hard to win, and you don't know what's going to come and go into the weight class. So if you get the chance to do it, you've got to do it now.
Yeah, I mean, she did it three times, and we said the bracket was stacked. I watched all her matches. I thought she wrestled well. She just had a stacked weight class, and it's just very difficult. She's a very good wrestler, phenomenal career, and it's pretty tough having two really good Nigerians. Mota Pettis Savage was the number 4 seed who got beat by the 5th seed, the Nigerian that won, Jumoke Adekoya. So it was just a really difficult thing. And it's really, I hate to say it's not fair, but it's like he kind of marched through year after year. And then all of a sudden, these people just pop in that have, never been competing in that, conference, in that national governing body. But it is what it is. And it's a great career for her.
Same theme applied with the exception of probably Savannah Isaac, who came in as a freshman and won it at 207, was that veterans came in and they won championships. And we saw that with Stefana Jelasic from Lords. We had talked about Inea Falcon all year. What an incredible season as a true freshman. Didn't have much freestyle experience, beat a lot of great wrestlers, but Jelasic just looked like she was ready to win, won her second championship, imposed her will, and just looked like a woman out there that just wanted to take the championship, and she got her second championship. So
Yeah.
I thought she looked good in the finals.
Yeah. And if she looked good, you knew she was there to wrestle against Morales in the semifinal. It was a very just she wrestled just a very physical match. I remember seeing one of these kind of blast doubles where she just went through her, and you said Stefan was ready. And yeah, we've talked about that. As a freshman, you're wrestling women, and they're physical, and it's an adjustment. And NAIA Falcon had a phenomenal season, and she just, she'd beaten Stefana, but she just lost this match, and Stefana was game on, and it was a very physical match, and that might have been the difference.
124, as we said, these are so fun to have where you have two age level world champions from California meet in the finals. Katie Gomez was actually up 5-3 at one point. I love it when you see Katie Gomez go for that ankle shot. She has a great low level shot, but it just came down to a criteria win for Cristel Rodriguez. I don't know what Katie Gomez is going to do going forward. I would assume she's going to go back to 53 kilos, which is her normal weight, but you just saw maybe a little bit of difference in size. That's a weight class that Cristel Rodriguez is probably more accustomed to. She won her second championship, but match of the night goes to Cristel Rodriguez in a razor thin margin.
Yeah, it was a great match as we thought. We wanted to see the match that we did. Rodriguez, if anything, has wrestled heavier at times. She's wrestled up at 57, and she looked bigger. To me, she looked bigger than Gomez, but I know, Gomez does cut weight to make 53, so I don't know what she'll do. She looked a little small, um, but on and the senior level, 53, is I don't know if Don Paris is going to compete or she's out, so it might be a more of an open weight where she could be very competitive. I'm sure she could be competitive at 55 as well, but Rodriguez will be there as well. You'll have Ariana Velasquez. So I mean, I don't know if Amanda Martinez is going to go 57 or 55. So, we'll see how the landscape comes out. We'll probably get a feel for it at the U.S. Open. But yeah, these are both high level, senior level wrestlers wrestling in an final, and it was a great match.
Zayna McBride looked good in her final. She beat a returning national champion. So right now, the McBride sisters have all won championships. Both Latifa and Zayna won this year. Jamila won last year. That's a pretty remarkable feat to have three sisters win three championships. It may not have been in the same year, but that is big time for Life University to have that. And you called it their murderers row, and that's a pretty special thing to have.
Yeah, McBride Murders Row. Yeah, and Wapalami Estrella Beauchamp, very good wrestler, as you said, national champ. She's got very, very good throws. She's very dangerous. She's got a lefty headlock, and McBride took care of her. It is very funny if you look back in wrestling when you have siblings. They don't always win in the same years. I remember Ben Peterson and his brother John. I think one gold, one silver, and then they switched it up. You had we talked about Buvasar Satiev, who won three gold medals. The only year he didn't win when he got beat by Brandon Slay, his brother Adam Satiev won a gold medal. So it's very hard to get all his siblings to do it at the same time. Um, when Tom Brands won his gold medal, Terry didn't make the team. Then Terry won a bronze medal when Tom wasn't on the team. So it doesn't always happen at the same time. Terry Steiner won his national championship. Troy had been a national champ, didn't win that year. And then Coach Steiner won. And there was probably the thing about it is there's nobody happier than the siblings that have done already. They so want their sibling to do what they've done. So it was really nice to see Zayna McBride get her national championship and complete the sweep for the family.
So many good things I can say about the NAIA division from sanctioning the sport in 2023. They were ahead of the NCAA on that. They've put a fantastic product together that's competing with the NCAA. I would say the NCAA is above them at this point, but they're right there in a race between those two divisions. Thought they did a good job of having a nice arena. The finals was raised stage, but there's just one thing that we both agreed on is that during the entirety of the tournament, besides the finals where you had commentary and they had the HD cameras, the cameras were pulled back. They didn't zoom in to follow the action. They didn't have commentators. and they didn't move the camera. And if you're trying to compete for recruits, those details absolutely matter because it looked like stick figures back there. You could hardly tell what the action was going. If it was away from the camera, you couldn't really see the action. If you were watching the NCAAs as a recruit and you watch the following week at NAIAs, I'm saying I like the NCAA product a lot more because it looked a lot better and they presented themselves better, and those details certainly do matter going forward.
Yeah, and it was very frustrating. I was trying to watch the whole tournament, and it really was hard to see, and it was kind of pissing me off, and because you really could not see what's going on. I even convinced my wife, who will sporadically watch wrestling. I think Sochi Pettis was up. I said, "Come watch Sochi's wrestling." She goes, she starts looking at it, she starts squinting, and she's got good eyesight. She's like, "I can't see anything. I'm not watching this." She walked away, and yeah, that can be better. And it's almost like I'd rather not have it streamed if it's streamed and it teases you and you can't really see what's going on. So I think you can get volunteers to hold the key. Each team can offer some volunteers or something. And then my other little complaint was you're watching this tournament the whole time in track wrestling, which is broadcasting through Flow, but you're watching the the brackets or the dashboard. You click on a match and goes up, and that worked until the finals. And all of a sudden, the finals were broadcast on a different platform. But you figured it out because you had watched the men's finals on the NAIA, but I didn't know that, and I don't know if anybody knew that. So all of a sudden, you're following the tournament, you finally get to the finals, you're ready to watch it, you click on the dashboard, and there's no match. And unless you knew about this NAIA website, you had to create a login, put all your information in, and I'm just like, really? We make it pretty difficult to follow this sport sometimes. And I think there needs to be better, one better filming of the first. I'm not trying to be so critical. It was a great tournament. The wrestling was great, but we can do better at this. And for the sake of fans and recruits, I think we need to build the following. So I think the camera footage on the earlier round needs to be better. And if you're going to switch platforms, which I don't like that to begin with, but it was such a great produced final round, but somehow let people know where they can watch this in a better way. And I'm sure the people that wrestle in the NAI and maybe the families got some email. I don't know, but let the average fans try to follow as well.
As we go back to what the mailbag question was from me to me was how do we get better? It does have to be repetition. I put out a streaming guide or a watch guide for the NAIs. I probably should have put in a link how you go there. I should have researched that a little bit more. But it also filters into another tournament that we followed, the NCWA, not to be confused with the NWCA. So just make sure you have the language. Again, this is something that I've only followed from the fringe, and I heard an explanation after one of the women's matches on what it means. It's going to take a while for me to really digest what it was, but I think they get offended by calling it a club sport. It is a sanctioned championship and at some level. You can offer scholarships. They wrestle folk style, not freestyle, but the production value was outstanding and they had fans. So to watch through that, there were some good matches. The one I watched, it was 9-9. I watched all of them, but the one that was most interesting, it went 9-9. She got a stall call at the end, which was a 2-point stall call that went into sudden victory. They had a great exchange in the sudden victory period and then ended up winning 12-9. But the NCWA deserves credit. And part of the reason I followed is because you have a great coach in Jason Mormon. They have a club team right now at Tarleton State. He's itching for that to become Division One. They won
Which
by
they will,
yeah.
which they will relatively soon. You
Let's
know
hope that
that.
happens really soon. But they won by half a point. So it's neat to see that someone that's high level like Jason Mormon, now we're checked into it. Now I'm following NCWA. But again, it's the repetition. I heard one explanation on how the tournament runs and what it means, but I just need to probably get it over and over and over again so that it's embedded in my DNA.
Yeah, it was a good production. I watched some of the matches as well because you told me about it, and pretty good crowd as well. God knows why they're wrestling folk style. It's just I don't agree with that at all. Maybe it's just because some of these athletes wrestle in high school and they're not that familiar with freestyle. I don't really know, And I would go back just so I'm not just totally bashing. Again, just to be clear, I thought the wrestling at the NAIA tournament was great. And I thought the venue was actually phenomenal. When you saw that venue, it looked like a great, arena. But yeah, I mean, I could see not calling it club sport. Hopefully, a lot of those teams, are aspiring to jump into the NAIA or the NCAA at some point, and this is a stepping stone. I know certainly for Jason Mormon is, and we'd like to see that with, some of these other teams as well. But the product was good.
This brings into another topic that I think is interesting. New York has this. It's called blended wrestling. Although this is different scoring, I like that they went back between a male, female wrestler back and forth with the finals. I think that's a neat concept. And I would like to see more of that kind of wrestling where you have a co-ed team. You can do that with wrestling that, unlike other sports, I know they've implemented a co-ed 4x400 meter relay at the Olympics where you have two men and two women. I think it'd be neat to have five men, five women, have some sort of a team. I don't know how you do that at the college level, but I like that New York has blended wrestling.
Well, the way they do it, and I could be wrong because these things are fluid and they're always changing. They have the men have a folk style season, then the women have a season. And they were wrestling folk style as well, but they've shifted and then they have a small season of like blended matches where you mix it up. And I think it's a blast. And I think the athletes like it. I think it's good for bonding. I think, a lot of times the men and the women, especially in high schools, like in the PSAL in New York City, they don't each have their own facilities or rooms. So there's overlap. They're in there anyway at times. So I think it just creates a bonding and familiarity. They get to be on the same team, and it's really fun to watch. And they do that. I believe it's in freestyle. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's a kind of fun thing. It's a kind of cool thing to experiment with, and I think they've all enjoyed it. Maybe there's some hardcore, you know, guys that aren't comfortable with it, but I think in general, the feedback I've heard is very good.
Talk about not catching a breath. You win a college championship for the NCAA and NAIA. Quick turnaround. If you want to be successful, you have to get to high level tournaments. Women's Nationals will be in Spokane in April, and then you have the U.S. Open. So the process doesn't end. You can win a championship, enjoy it for a while, but you have to get back to work. And one of our favorite tournaments, two of them, Women's Nationals and the U.S. Open, are coming up, and we're going to be following that.
Yeah, those are my two favorite. I mean, we always call it U.S. Nationals Body Bar. It was originally sponsored by them. It's a great tournament. And I was like just poking through the brackets, just looking a little bit. And I mean, like it's some of the middleweights for like U17. I mean, the bracket's already stacked. I mean, these are going to be highly competitive tournaments where the top, there's 5 to 10 like really good wrestlers at least, and then people come out of the woodwork that maybe haven't tried these national tournaments yet. And then you have the U23s, you have U17 juniors and U23s, and then the U.S. Opens in April, which they're doing again. If the athlete wins the tournament in a weight um, that doesn't have a world Olympic medalist, then they sit in the finals of Final X, and then there will be a world team trial tournament to get the other participant. If you have a world medalist, they are sitting in the finals, and then whoever wins the U.S. Open is in Final X against them. So I think it's a good format. It gives a lot of advantage to world medalists, but that's a reward. You win a world medal, you're the king of the mountain until proven otherwise. So you sit in the finals and Final X. But U.S. Open is always a great tournament. It's in Vegas. It's a different venue this year. It's more downtown. It had been in South Point for a while. They changed the venue this year, and see how it goes.
And I think at 68 kilos, we might see a situation. Kennedy Blades would be a returning medalist at 76. I'm pretty sure that she doesn't get that right to sit in the finals if she goes to a different weight class. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. That's my understanding. In the past, what they did was they like gave you a bye to the semis, and it was kind of weird because you had uneven brackets in the top and the bottom if you had one of those people that did that. I believe this year you just get the number one seed. I could be wrong, but that's what I think is the case. They're always tweaking the rules a little bit, every so often they do something that's just horrible, but for the most part, I think the format's pretty good.
Going back to the repetition, it took me years to understand what body bar was. I'd hear that over and over until I really got completely entrenched into women's wrestling. Then you understand it's a former name for women's nationals, but it takes just being in it and seeing it over and over and over again. And that's the point. You've got to have repetition of quality, correct, accurate information over and over.
Absolutely. And that's a great tournament. I have not been to it at Spokane, but I've been to it in Texas many, many times. What's fun about the tournament is you can kind of walk around, just be standing on the mat, right next to any mat. So there's really just a chance to see a lot of really good wrestlers. And the first time we went there, I remember it's one thing to like wrestle like in local tournaments. It could even be like a local state tournament. All of a sudden, you show up at this tournament, which is to make world teams, and this was a U17, and all of a sudden these are like UWW quality refs. They're really calling stalling really quick. They're just marching it back to the center. It's just really, until you get used to it, it's a notch higher, and it's game on, and it's really intense, really intense.